Hey guys, hey, we have been recording such deep dive sessions for our internal team and external clients, and though we had such tremendous feedback from them, so we decided to put it live for everyone, so everyone will be able to access that from the industry permanent and have as a permanent references in online. So maybe let's introduce ourselves. I'll start from the Scott.
Hey, I'm Scott. For me, insurance is the ultimate sandbox. It really allows me to fuse my background in data mining, AI, and underwriting into a single mission, really trying to achieve autonomy in the brokerage space.
Hi guys. I feel the same about insurance. So my background has been more in like process analysis and business process automation, which is something that really applies well to insurance and also like the financial service brokerage markets, because there's always such a need to integrate systems that are often very fragmented and have a lot of steps in them within your overall tech stack.
Yeah, I focus more on the bigger picture and the like customer experience to make sure actually what we are building is something that insurance brokers will use day to day, right? And that will save a lot of their time comparing to how it's working right now, right? As a lot of this stuff is pretty manual, right? And we make sure that we are stick to what they need and maybe highlight even sometimes part of the things that they may not be even aware that that's possible to automate or uh, put it on the rails, right? So that will be running on the background for them. So that's a little bit from my background. And let's just jump right into it. And from the last thing we discussed regarding the bottlenecks that insurance brokers might have regarding carrier appetite, maybe you can discuss it a little bit from your perspective, Scott. What do you think here is the biggest challenge or the nightmare for the brokers might be right now?
Yeah, it's been really difficult. Carrier appetite is difficult because you're dealing with a moving target. It's not something like you get a structured underwriting rules and you get to follow it. The criteria are constantly changing with political changes, with risk, carriers balancing out risk. So the carrier appetite is constantly shifting. One week a carrier might be really specific and really love a specific type of class of business, and the next week it might be shedding it completely. So you just don't know. So brokers are spending hours trying to figure out where the risk fits in. They're going through these PDFs, like they're or documents. They're long. And they can be very specific, and they can be quite hard to follow. Like, they're not necessarily done in a consistent manner between carrier to carrier. So it's a little bit of a solving the puzzle, these guidelines. Then it comes into manual effort. So it's spending a lot of time filling out the specifics, and going through and finding all the criteria, finding all the forms, the supplemental forms that need to be filled out for each carrier, and when, and if it even passes the underwriting criteria or risk criteria, to try to get those submission out the doors. Like, it's a headache. Like, it's a puzzle. Only to get an instant decline if you get it wrong, right? So you're putting all this effort, you're filling out these forms, and then you send it off, you're getting a decline because you missed the criteria, or something small, but you've put the effort to collect that data from the customer and go through that process. So it's definitely a challenge, like a huge challenge for brokers, because of the rules changing. Especially right now, it's always changing. It's a completely reactive, incredibly frustrating, and the effort to reward ratio is broken. Like, it's just a human challenge, and it's a big one.
Yeah. What you describe actually to me feels like you are trying to find something blindfolded in the actually dark room, right? And sometimes and the request what you're trying to find is constantly changing, right? So,
Right, right.
and James, how we are approaching that in our software, like in a Prudence, how we are resolving that moving target.
Yeah, so I mean, the main focus of that is to have everything revolving around like a dynamic knowledge base, like a centralized location for all the information about carrier requirements, like what what kind of things a client will look for them to be approved by a carrier, and also what docs need to be collected by that from the end customer for the carrier to do their evaluation. So the way that we've sort of built that is that because it's a dynamic database, you can ingest that information in as you get updates from carriers, and then that's going to just be used to assess the different risk levels of clients when you have an intake coming in. So it will look at that. It will then match against the knowledge base and see which carriers are going to be the best fit. It's also once it's determined that it's going to know which documents need to be provided to do an evaluation. So when you've got your intake and it's chosen which carriers it should go for, then it's going to let you it's going to basically pull up those documents for you, and it's going to pre-populate that with information from the intake. So whereas other systems we've seen out there, yes, they'll do the population, but you have to go through that constantly evolving list that Scott spoke of different documents to work out what you actually need to submit to the carrier. Whereas with Prudence, is dynamically checking that, and it's updating, and it's knowing, okay, now this is what this carrier is going to need to satisfy an application for this product line, and therefore these are the documents I'm going to fill out for them to review. And if there were gaps from the intake in those forms, once they're prepared, it can highlight that to the broker so they can plug the remaining 10%, let's say.
Yeah. But that's a loan that's already saving lots of hours per account I had, and that's not about just finding like the one market and also getting the best. What is the best for the client, right? And Scott, how we are handling right now this actual strategy of quoting inside of our software.
Right, right. So, the first thing is we don't want to just kind of blindly blast the market, right, from carrier to carrier to carrier. This is a cost in time. It's a cost, getting your preferred carrier. So it's 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 something that you really want to create a strategy for. So inside Prudence, we create tiers. So we're creating tiers by product line. So these tiers are based on the benefit and the quality of the carrier for that specific risk. And it's also customizable. So you can create your own underwriting guidelines, your own preferences, your own tiers. So, if you have a preference because you have a better relationship with a carrier, you can set that up as like, these are my tier 1 carriers, always choose them for these product lines. These are my tier 2, these are my tier 3. Otherwise, the system's going to do it based on the underwriting, and it's learning based on what it thinks is going to be successful or not successful. So it's having that strategy in place is, it's about that turnaround and response to the market. So, the system allows you to optimize that response. It helps you target your tier 1 preferences first. If it's not a fit, or if you need to pivot, then the system seamlessly drops down to the next tier. So you're filling out tier 1, then you're filling out tier 2, filling out tier 3. And as you kind of complete those, you don't really need to go to the next tier, obviously, if you're getting the right response. The seamless mapping the data to the requirements to the tier 2 markets. So it's an automated waterfall effect that ensures that we're maximizing the outcome both for the client and for the agents and their commission structure. But normally it's about what is optimal for the client than it is more than anything else.
Yeah. But let me challenge that for a second here. As we're talking about this moving part, right? And how do we overcome this challenge? Like not to be just another outdated database, right? That's we're storing and collecting just outdated data that's no longer valid for our case. Um, and how we stay accurate as well in that situation for that purpose and that.
Well, I think that really comes down to like the continuous improvement methodology that we have within the overall architecture of the system. So yes, you're going to be having your own inputs that you're going to be putting in around based on certain things in the intake. You want these product lines to be recommended, and these are our preferred carriers. But the system is also going to be looking at the outcomes of those submissions, which is a really important part of it. So if a submission gets declined from what you have ranked as the number one priority carrier for this particular product line, for this particular type of customer with these attributes, then Prudence is going to be able to see that, and then it can dynamically make adjustments and say, okay, well, it looks like actually that this kind of customer is being declined by this carrier. So actually, I'm going to rewrite this and say that's a lower priority. I'm going to prioritize this carrier for this particular product line because this one is getting a better approval rating for these parameters than the carrier that was originally put in first place. So yeah, it's a living and breathing underwriting assistant. At the end of the day, it is intelligently looking at things and it is intelligently making continuous improvement based on what it learns from what works and what doesn't work with the carriers.
Yeah, so in total, like for the bottom line, what this actually means, so we are getting back with Prudence for the insurance brokers, we are changing their roles from just simply data cleric that you're spending hours manually entering data, different fields, collecting that, analyzing, and just shifting that towards where they are spending their time most effectively, like speaking to the clients, right? Having that conversation, consulting them what they actually need, and closing that um, gap for their clients, right? Instead of just wasting lots of hours manually, like on some data mining, understanding of how that's working, shaping it in the right form. And how many like hours average broker are usually spending roughly on that type of task for administrative purpose?
Yeah, I mean, our the motivation here, like the rationale for setting this up is like it's insane. It's insane. Like industry data is showing the average broker is spending like 28 to 29 hours a week, like completely
That's
insane
huge.
on administration tasks. With handling applications and renewals eating up like 25% of that of a broker's total productivity. So it's even if it's direct or indirect, someone's still doing this administration task. Like it's a massive overhead, and rekeying data into a single submission package alone can often take over 2 hours. This is a huge cost of just of typing, like just
Yeah.
copying and pasting and matching and typing. Um, by automatically matching carriers to risk, identifying missing data, and generating like core submission, Prudence really strips away that burden. We're estimating that an agency using this system could probably save around 2 hours per day per agent. Like it's quite significant.
Yeah, it is. I mean, when you sort of multiply that up through like even like a small or medium sized team, that's hundreds of hours of time that's being spent on admin. And it's not just the cost of the time either. Like on one side, you've also got the fact that you could scale up your volume without actually increasing the headcount of your team because your admin isn't growing exponentially with that. But it's also the time it actually takes to process the submissions. Like if it's taking you a fifth of the time to process a submission, then your quote to bind ratios are going to go up dramatically because you'll be more competitive and you're going to be getting the quotes back to the end prospect a lot more quickly than your competitors. So there's benefits on that side as well.
Yeah. I think this is where the industry as a whole is heading actually towards the autonomous brokerage, and basically this is what the brokers should be doing, like they consulting their clients and not feeling the carrier guidelines and retyping the PDFs. So I think seeing is believing, and this is why we would like to prove that to different agencies. So we will set up like the progress up with the Prudens completely for free and we want them to try it out, and basically to run it for the next complex submission through everything through the system and actually see and measure the impact of it, how many hours they saved, how many successful cases they're running, and what is actually a ratio of this autonomous brokerage towards what they are doing on a daily routine task that just consuming in manual labor instead. And we'll put the links down below for this video, so people who want to try it out for themselves can completely do this completely for free. Just hit us up and we will set up everything for them.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I hope that's been
Thanks, Tom.
interesting. We'll speak to
Thank
you
you.
soon.